The North Carolina Securities Division supports non-biased investor education programming on public television that helps educate and protect the investing public. By the Investor Protection Trust, a nonprofit organization devoted to investor education and protection. Since 1993, the Investor Protection Trust has worked with states across the country to provide the independent, objective investor education needed by all Americans to make informed investment decisions.
He said, "Take it, Phil, it's free money."
What you thought was one type of investment is a completely different investment altogether.
It was marketed as something very different than what it was.
I know of no other individuals who have been so violated, so heinously, as this group of people.
The biggest investment bankers in the country were dishonest, totally dishonest.
We're talking about the major financial institutions whose commercials you see on television every night.
It is the most audacious, outlandish scandal and theft that Wall Street ever thought it could get away with.
In 2008 marked one of the biggest financial scandals in U.S. history. Yet somehow, in the midst of all the other financial failures, this one went virtually unnoticed.
We've experienced significant turmoil in our financial markets in the last few days.
Consumer confidence plunges to its lowest level in 16 years.
The financial system permitted a scale of risk-taking that has caused grave damage to the lives of so many Americans.
In 2008, brokers were selling a no-lose money market type of investment, telling clients it was just like holding cash. When the overall market crashed, these investors, and we're talking tens of thousands, were left out in the cold. In fact, their accounts were frozen to the tune of $330 billion. So while these bad investments didn't attract the same national media attention as the mortgage crisis, one securities regulator from North Carolina decided it was time to make investors in her state whole. If you haven't heard of the ARS crisis, it's time you did.
When the market rate for auction rate securities froze in February of 2008, most folks didn't really know particularly what had happened. Because auction rate securities was a phrase that was not used a lot in connection with all of the financial commentary that was going on. And a lot of people that held positions in auction rate securities didn't know that that's what the whole concept was called.
Originally, the product was created to provide a viable alternative to securities or money market funds. What makes them auction rate securities is that the interest rate or the dividend rate that these securities pay is set regularly and periodically at an auction called for that process.
In the beginning, investors had to come in with $250,000 in order to participate in this market. As the market started to show cracks and fissures here, there, and elsewhere, the Wall Street geniuses decided to allow the little guy to come in. And the little guy could come in for $25,000 a pop. Those are the so-called retail investors.
These securities, these auction rate securities, were promoted, sold, distributed as cash-type instruments. Money market alternatives, cash instruments. Little did investors know, though, that there was this massive tail risk.
Around February of 2008, all of the auctions that gave these products their liquidity came to a screeching halt, and that is called an auction failure.
See, it was the continuation of these auctions that was the key here. The auctions were held weekly, and investors, big and small, were buying and selling. The problem started when there wasn't enough demand to support these auctions. So the big brokerage firms stepped in and artificially created enough demand to keep the auctions rolling. So they'd submit their own bids just to prop up the market, and it all worked beautifully until it didn't. Finally, in February '08, right before the mortgage crisis hit, these brokerage firms pulled the plug on their own auction rate securities, and that's when the market froze, and along with it, that $330 billion of investors' money.
The auction rate securities scandal was without a doubt the biggest bond scandal in modern history. I know everybody thinks Bernie Madoff is the biggest thief since Jesse James. He wasn't. $68 billion. That's Bernie Madoff. I'm talking about $336 billion, okay? This is an institutional crime. This isn't some little con man.
When new money comes in to take out existing holders, that's a Ponzi-style financing. The Wall Street dealers, which had been propping these markets up, giving the appearance of healthy auctions, Wall Street totally backed away and the market totally failed. They called up their brokers, or shortly thereafter, the brokers called them. I want my cash. I want my money. You know what? The market's not functioning. You can't get your money.
And we began to receive complaints from various and assorted folks and institutions saying they had money in this, they were told they could get it back, and when they asked for it, they couldn't get it back. These were things like homeowners associations. These were people who had sold houses and were going to buy a new one. Sometimes they were companies who had parked their cash there just for safekeeping. They didn't realize they were actually investing. They thought they were just putting their money into a bank-like situation.
It wasn't liquid like they thought it would be. And so whatever they had planned on doing with that money, whatever it was, they couldn't do that.
Whether those people ultimately get their money back or not, who knows? To say that there's been a gross injustice would be perhaps the greatest understatement of the last couple of years.
So who was out there peddling these money market-like investments? Well, how about names like J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, Wachovia, and Merrill Lynch? Now, over time, most of these Wall Street giants wound up agreeing to settle their ARS claims. Many settled on their own, and others only under pressure from a task force organized by all the state securities regulators who helped recover more than $60 billion. But not all of these brokers chose to keep their promises to investors. Firms like Schwab, Oppenheimer, and E-Trade, also known as second-tier brokers, they left thousands of their customers still having to fight to access their own money.
Those institutions, I think they're pointing back upstream and saying, hey, wait a second. It was those big guys on Wall Street that really controlled the process. You know what? Ignorance or turning a blind eye to an issue, that's no excuse.
We concluded, along with the other states that were with the NASA task force, that probably the best thing that the states could do with respect to those firms that they were looking at was try to get the money back for the unsophisticated, small mom-and-pop investors.
We were not going to linger on and on and on because people needed money for their lives.
North Carolina launched 19 investigations. The most notable holdout? E-Trade.
We issued 2 administrative subpoenas, one in the spring of '09 and one in the fall of '09, to which we got very limited responses. We were trying to ascertain at that point how many investors we had in North Carolina, what was the breadth and extent of their investments in E-Trade, and we literally got almost nothing from them.
E-Trade had about 90 to 100 investors in North Carolina who had auction rate securities in their accounts with E-Trade at the time the market collapsed, and we wanted to make sure that their issues and concerns were addressed.
They were failing to respond to a legitimately issued subpoena that is standard practice under state law in these kinds of things. So we realized that we needed to move forward in order to be able to help our North Carolina investors. And ultimately, we did begin an action to suspend or revoke their ability to do business in North Carolina.
We alleged that they had not provided us with the books and records as they were required to do, which is a violation of the law, that they had not properly trained their salespeople in the specific, unique characteristics of auction rate securities, and that they had not done the proper evaluation in selling these products, whether auction rate securities as an investment was in fact suitable for those individuals to whom they were sold.
It's against the law to omit to state an important or material fact if the omission is misleading. So you don't necessarily have to have criminal fraud there. You don't necessarily have to have the intent, the evil intent to try to steal money. All you have to have for an anti-fraud violation is a misstatement of an important fact.
People really thought they were just parking their money. They were just salting it away. They were putting it in an account that had the chance of getting just a slightly higher interest return rate, when in fact they actually were investing in something dependent upon this auction and investing in long-range debt instruments. So people thought they were just placing their money somewhere safe, somewhere very liquid, easy to get back, when in fact that was not the case at all.
How much money did you give this gentleman?
$100,000.
The pitch was, here is an investment that will earn you more interest, and it is functionally the same as a money market account that you can trot down to your bank and withdraw your investment at par or face value anytime you want to. Well, that was not correct.
So it was really an investment, and it was inappropriate to put a lot of these people in who had no risk tolerance and never had been explained to them that there was any risk in it.
If I didn't trust the financial advisor here, I wouldn't have invested a nickel with him. So I had total trust in him. And he should have told me what the risks were, in which case I would have told him, as I did in the case of others, I don't want any part of it.
Some of these investment products are intentionally designed to be incredibly complicated. A lot of times they're so complicated that the people selling them cannot accurately explain how they work.
In the end, the customers are the ones that suffer. Since 1960, I have been a lawyer. I'm mostly retired now. So I would guess my occupation now is retired lawyer.
Howard and Joan Castell were hit especially hard. On the advice from their trusted broker, a man they'd known since 1972, they invested their life savings into what they believed was a pretty straightforward money market investment. $2.2 million.
I was basically a saver, not an investor. I was so risk adverse that from time to time, the financial advisor would call me, and he told me that it was basically a cash equivalent, like a money market, and it was liquid, and there was no risk. On February 15, I got a call from my financial advisor telling me that the market, that the auctions had frozen, that they had failed.
I didn't really believe it. I thought, you just don't lose that. They'll relax, it'll be okay. Eventually they'll resolve it. And they didn't.
I filed a lawsuit at the end of August 2009.
I really didn't want him to. And I said, it's going to turn your life upside down. And then he told me how much money we lost. And then I knew we had to try.
I spent a lot of time agonizing over and investigating this matter. It created a tremendous amount of emotional stress I've been under medical care since that time. I take medications for stress. My blood pressure is high.
The mental anguish, the lack of sleep, the worry, it's just been terrible.
And since that time, I now have gotten back all but $500,000. And when I say all but 500, that's still very a lot of money to me.
The untold cost of the personal turmoil and anxiety, the mental anguish, honestly, that's as great, perhaps probably even greater than the actual monetary costs. Most people honestly lack the knowledge and don't have the financial wherewithal to pursue reclaiming their funds in the manner that Howard Castle did. So I hope that Howard not only has his funds reclaimed, but that gets elevated to help others as well.
If my broker were sitting in front of me right now, I'd probably say shame on you for what you've done to me, and I know you've done to other people. I trusted him with all my money. His reputation was impeccable.
See, it's that loss of trust, that crisis of confidence that's at the heart of the North Carolina case. As the team of prosecutors and investigators prepare for trial, other tireless advocates emerged in the ARS scandal.
When I worked on Wall Street, I was personally not involved in the auction rate market, nor as a personal investor have I ever owned even a dollar's worth of auction rate securities. But I knew that there were people out there that needed a voice, and so I've been writing aggressively about it for the last 2+ years.
My broker said, you know, Phil, you've got a lot of cash here on the side. Why don't you get into the auction rate market? It's absolutely great. It's the next best thing to being in heaven. It's AAA rated. My understanding was that it was cash. It was a floater. It was a cash equivalent. It was entirely liquid. It was a nice warm puddle of cash. And I said, okay, and I took it. I found that it was frozen on Valentine's Day.
I felt so bad for these people, and I just wanted to allow them the opportunity to have a voice. They deserve to get their cash back. Phil's book, Ruthless, it is the be-all and end-all in terms of understanding what really happened in the world of auction rate securities.
I had to tell the story with all its drama and its heartbreak and its redemption and its justice at the end. But it's also to educate you and to show you just how slippery this business is.
Phil, to his credit, he was made whole, and he got his money back. But that didn't stop Phil's fight.
We came out of it okay. We're fine. We're fine. We're on a crusade here, okay? But there are a lot of people who are still suffering desperately out there. It's still $138 billion under challenge.
I think of a fellow out in the state of Colorado who has told me the untold pain and mental anguish that he has gone through. He talked about how his marriage was on the rocks, how he couldn't fund his son's college education because he couldn't access the cash. I think this fella is literally at the point where he was contemplating suicide. That's wrong.
I have had calls from people who have under treatment for cancer who can't afford it any longer.
I get my passion reading stories like that, and I go right back on that blog, and I continue to call these institutions out and say, do the right thing. It's not your money. Return the money.
Maybe in the end, the best that we can do is rattle some cages and shake up the public and say, look, maybe humanity, maybe decency, just common decency, can come back into the market. Maybe common decency can come back into the regulatory authority, back into the government.
Remember, Wall Street can't function unless there's confidence in the system. And as for the hearing in North Carolina, it never happened. In March 2011, E-Trade agreed to a settlement. The outcome of that settlement is laid out in a 21-page document called the Legal Consent Order. In it, among other commitments, E-Trade agreed to make investors whole, paying $400,000 in legal fees and a $25,000 fine.
It sends a message not just to E-Trade, but to the whole industry that, number one, a state regulator can take on a big company. Number two, that even though it ended up that we had not a large number of people, it doesn't matter. If it's that person's life investment, state regulators are going to pay attention to make sure that the playing field is level for them. We have now a final order in place that has several aspects to it. The first is that they will cease and desist from the marketing strategies that they were doing prior to this. Second, they have paid the maximum civil fine under North Carolina law. Thirdly, and very importantly, this order that we have is calculated to change their way of doing business. It is an effort to change the culture of how these kind of products are handled. There is now an overseer, a supervisor, if you will, a consultant, who is going to be training E-Trade folks on how they can market their products in the effort to change that culture. That reporting and oversight process will go on for up to 2 years.
There's no doubt in my mind why E-Trade chose to settle, because they wanted to close the books. Let's not allow this to get personal. Let's not allow this to get into the realm of having individual brokers from E-Trade talk about the sales points, the sales pressures. What were the emails from management in terms of liquidating positions, getting rid of these products? That would be painful.
North Carolina law, like every other law, has an appropriateness standard. People need to be told not just the true facts about a particular investment, but they need to be told all of the relevant facts. And that includes the risk involved. And that never happened in these auction rate security sales. If E-Trade violates this order, we have the right to come back in there. We're continuing to pay attention.
We wanted to get E-Trade's side of the story, but they declined to comment on the case.
What the auction rate securities saga did to this country and to a lot of investors, especially smaller investors, is to destroy the trust that they had in their financial professionals, and it destroyed the trust that they had in the governmental entities that are charged with protecting them.
I could never trust any investment, ever again. As Howard said, how can you trust anybody, particularly somebody who Howard had known for all these years?
The lesson is we have a Washington-Wall Street nexus that is extremely pathological, and we have to fix it. How we're going to fix it is we need a moral and ethical revolution in this country.
We need to pursue truth, and we need transparency. Then we can have the integrity and the trust. This country needs Wall Street, but we need a healthy Wall Street, and we need a healthy regulatory system so we can recapture the trust.
Whenever you go through one of these situations in which you enter a transaction, a business relationship, and it's a relationship of trust, and you find out that the rules that you had expected are not there, you no longer have quite so much trust in the people that you're dealing with, and you no longer have the trust in the system. You tend to kind of want to distance yourself from that type of financial transaction, and you want to safeguard what you have.
There are enough risks in the market as it is, whether it's the weather or foreign policy or things like that. But to have it start out based upon a misrepresentation, misleading promotion conversation, that's really bad footing. We're very pleased with our success. We got the maximum fine allowed under North Carolina law currently. Secondly, investors have been made whole in this state. Thirdly, we are changing the culture within the sales desk at E-Trade. And this will be of benefit to North Carolina investors, investors around the world, and bad practices have been exposed.
The North Carolina Securities Division supports non-biased investor education programming on public television that helps educate and protect the investing public. By the Investor Protection Trust, a nonprofit organization devoted to investor education and protection. Since 1993, the Investor Protection Trust has worked with states across the country to provide the independent, objective investor education needed by all Americans to make informed investment decisions.